Welcome to the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance Bill Review Training. The purpose of this training is to get you started with the information you'll need to participate as a bill reviewer. Topics we will cover include why we do bill reviews, some resources that you may find useful while doing reviews, the mechanics of actually reviewing a bill, and what to do when you are reviewing a bill and have questions. And finally, we'll go over a few sample bills to demonstrate the bill review process. While the bill review process is fairly straightforward once you've done a few, the process may seem a little overwhelming as we go through this training. It is important not to get discouraged. Review the training material and start reviewing bills. There is no substitute for actually doing some real reviews, and even if you make mistakes, the NHLA can still get a lot of value out of a review that's close enough. Before we get into the how we review a bill, it is important to understand some of the reasons why we review bills in the first place. In a typical legislative year, there are more than 1,000 bills that are considered by the state legislature. The sheer quantity means that activists can't always find the bills they want to act on alone. Having many eyes reviewing bills and helping to find the impactful ones means we can get activists and friendly legislators engaged early. Liberty activists and legislators will often go to speak in front of committees in support of or against a specific piece of legislation. Having another set of eyes looking at the bills and coming up with the top-level talking points can be a great starting point for someone writing committee testimony. As a bill works its way through the House and Senate, content from the bill review helps us direct our energy to stop bad bills or support good bills. Even in cases where we are unable to fully stop a bad bill, getting involved early may allow friendly legislators to submit amendments that minimize the harm of legislation if we are unable to stop it. Bill review content also helps the NHLA to draft and release the gold standard. This is a weekly publication that we provide to legislators to help them decide how to vote. Even in New Hampshire, there are legislators who don't have the time to fully read every bill that comes up for a vote. Some legislators rely on guidance from party leadership and outside sources to help them understand the legislation. The gold standard provides a Liberty perspective on voting recommendations in bill summaries. Having a quality bill review, particularly for high-impact bills, helps the NHLA to have a high-quality gold standard, as there is generally less than a week from the point when the legislative calendar is released until we have to send the gold standard to the printer. Bill reviews and the gold standards that follow from them allow the NHLA to create an annual legislative scorecard called the Liberty Rating. This, in turn, helps us to determine which incumbents running for re-election should be endorsed and supported by activists. Some bills can be reviewed without making reference to any external resources. However, there are several resources that you should be aware of that you may find helpful. For a limited number of issues, the NHLA has general guidance on how we will approach the issues. This does not mean that our position on any particular bill is a foregone conclusion, but being familiar with the positions can be helpful. We'll go into a little more detail about each of these in a minute. There are a number of issues on which the NHLA does not generally take a direct position, since there are competing liberty principles. Prior gold standards, and for that matter, prior bill reviews, can be helpful, as it is not uncommon for very similar legislation to be entered year after year. While I would not generally recommend searching for every topic before reviewing every bill, over time you may come to recognize topics, and in these cases, reviewing prior content can save time. Finally, there is an NHLA Bill Reviewers Facebook group where you can ask questions about specific legislation or the bill review system itself. Next are resources on the state website. All bill reviewers should read the New Hampshire Constitution from beginning to end at least once. For a non-trivial number of reviews, I open and refer to the Constitution to help determine the constitutionality of proposed legislation. While arguments based solely on conflicts with the state constitution may not be broadly effective, they should still be included when a bill conflicts with the Constitution. The existing laws are something that you'll need to become comfortable reading. Many bills revise existing language, and so often understanding the existing text is key to understanding if a particular bill is pro-liberty or anti-liberty. If the existing law called for a 100% tax rate, then a bill that proposes to change that rate to 50%, as horrendous as that sounds, would still be an improvement. Finally, an additional source can be the state party platforms. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes. While this training is not a substitute for reading the NHLA positions page, we'll quickly cover each of the major topics just to have a general sense of where the NHLA stands on some very key issues. The death penalty used to be among our do not touch issues, but after a survey of membership, the NHLA board voted to remove this issue from do not touch and take the position that New Hampshire would be well served to discontinue the option of using the death penalty. The NHLA believes in the fundamental right of self-ownership, and as a result, it is not the proper role of the state to decide what individuals may eat, drink, or smoke. In addition, prohibition continues to be a proven failure at curbing abuse and increases the power of criminal cartels. We believe that families, not the state, are in the best position to control the education of their children. People have the right to know how their money is being spent. Transparency, even though it may have modest costs, is required to keep corruption and waste in check. The NHLA supports the right to keep and bear arms and believes that this right, as recognized in Article 2A of the New Hampshire Constitution, is not contingent on a government-issued permission slip. We believe that government is the most accountable and accessible when it is most local. Therefore, we believe that local control is generally preferable to state or national mandates. We do believe that there is a higher principle, however, the principle of individual liberty. For this reason, we support state laws that prevent local governments from abridging the personal or property rights of individuals. Taxes compel people to fund programs which may be counterproductive or even unethical. We believe most or all goods and services can and should be funded on the basis of voluntary consent. We support efforts to reduce taxes and put money back under the control of the people who earned it. Government programs create dependency and often do far more harm than good. We believe voluntary charities are the ideal way to address the needs of those who require assistance. Once again, please read the NHLA positions page for detailed rationales about each of these positions. Prior gold standards may be helpful to you while reviewing a bill. The NHLA website has a search feature that allows you to limit searches to prior gold standards. Here, you can see a search for civil asset and see that this term has appeared several times in the gold standard. Always read and understand the current bill and be on the lookout for the need to change the argument to match the updated legislation. It may be useful to be familiar with the state party platforms, as some legislators may be more likely to respond to an argument that includes the fact that a particular bill is either aligned with or contrary to their own party's platform. A bill review argument should almost never rely on any party's platform to make a judgment about whether a particular bill is pro or anti-liberty, but it can still be an effective argument. Remember that the NHLA is nonpartisan, and as such, you should feel free to reference any or all parties' platforms when researching a bill. If you recognize that a particular bill is aligned or against a party's platform, here are some examples about how you might document a talking point in the review. Indicate which party's legislators should be aware of the supporting platform blank, and where practical, quote a subset of the platform text. Platform references should always be considered secondary to more fundamental liberty arguments. Particularly when you are first getting started with reviews, don't overthink or overuse these resources. Trying to sift through all of these materials on every bill will slow you down. Start with the Constitution, and as time goes on and you become familiar with resources, start to add others. Often, even if you know all of the resources well, you'll be able to review a bill without ever having to look at any of these resources. And most importantly, if you are reading a bill and it is low impact and liberty neutral, finish up the review and move on to the next. Save your efforts for those bills where there is a high return for the investment of your precious time. Now that you've got the basics for what goes into a bill review, we can look at the mechanics of what it takes to actually do a review. Go to the NHLA website. You'll need to actually be a member of the NHLA, and you'll need to log in. If you've not already been granted bill review privileges, you'll need to email research@newhampshireliberty.org to have your account configured. There are usually more than 1,000 bills that we need to review, and in that regard, any bill review that you complete adds value to the process. However, here are some guidelines that you can use to help you figure out where to start. The most important thing you can do is to look at the list of unreviewed bills and review bills that have some action coming up on them at the State House. Bills, particularly as they apply to the current law, can be complicated. Some reviewers choose to focus on bills going through a particular committee or related to a topic about which they are passionate. Remaining focused on a topic that you care about is a great way to avoid burnout and to ensure that you have the deep knowledge that might be helpful on one or more of the complicated bills. You may find that certain topics are already fairly well covered. For example, firearms-related bills tend to have a lot of passionate followers, in which case you may start to see that certain topics are not well covered. If you are willing to dig into a topic like this, for example, insurance law, you could quickly become an expert. For your first few bills, the approach I recommend is to find a simple bill, regardless of topic, and review it. Some bills have many pages of text or impact multiple complex areas of existing laws. Feel free to stay away from those as you get started. In the end, it is more important that you find a place to start that works for you and begin reviewing bills than almost anything else. Well, almost anything. Remember, we almost always need help with bills that have near-term activity going on in the State House. You'll see a page that looks somewhat like this once you click on the link to show unreviewed bills. The list is always sorted by action date, so starting from near the top and scrolling through for a bill of interest is the way to go. Once you find a bill and actually begin editing and reviewing the bill, others will be locked out from making edits. If you start a review and you can't finish it, please make sure you quit the review so that others can pick it up. When you click on a bill in the list of unreviewed bills, you'll be presented with a summary of the status for the bill and the bill text itself. After reading the bill text, if you think that this is a bill you'd like to review, click the See this bill's review to start the review process. This will bring you to a read-only, generally blank version of the bill review form for the bill. Click Review this bill to begin editing the review. The same form will now appear, but you'll be able to edit the various fields and start your review. We'll now start to look in detail at each of the key sections of the bill review form. The first thing you are asked to fill in is a selection box where you can indicate the topic or topics that this bill addresses. You can use the Control key and potentially click multiple topics. While this is useful data, don't spend too much time on it. Find something close, click it, and move on. The next field is the bill summary. It is usually filled by default, and often the default summary is fine as is. If you think it can be clarified, feel free to edit it. Don't feel compelled to change it, particularly for neutral or very low impact bills. But on high impact bills, you may want to change it from generic state language such as relative to alimony to something a little more specific like automatically reduces alimony payments in cases where there is a tangible reduction in income. If it is changed, try to keep it to 1 or 2 sentences. Next are a few very simple fields. We rate bills as pro-liberty, anti-liberty, neutral, or unsure. Next is the impact with possible ratings of high, average, and low. A high-impact bill would be one that impacts a majority of the people in the state, or perhaps creates a new state agency. Average impact is a bill that impacts only a small subset of the population, even though that impact may be large. Or it could be a bill that impacts a broader population in a small way. Low-impact bills tend to be things that don't make significant changes to existing law or take actions that have no lasting consequences on liberty. Some bills do not actually create any lasting legislation, but rather they form committees to research topics associated with future legislation. If the bill you are reviewing only forms or modifies a study committee, then check the box, mark the bill as low impact, and move on to the next bill review. Don't invest further effort into the bill. The next area of the bill review is a series of buttons where you will indicate whether the bill has certain attributes or not. For instance, the first set are related to civil rights, personal responsibility, and the right to property. These factors, along with the pro, anti-liberty friendly rating, are used to convert the bill into a numeric score that is used to help activists recognize the bills that we should be paying attention to. You don't have to get these exactly right. Read each question and make your choice. In some cases, a bill may be NA for one or more of these factors. Next, we rate the bill on clarity, accountability, constitutionality, and enforceability. If you take the position that the bill is unconstitutional, you should add a note later in the review making reference to the section of the Constitution that is being violated. Next, we indicate whether the bill increases or decreases regulation or bureaucracy. In addition, we look at the fiscal and taxation impacts of the bill. A positive fiscal impact would be a bill that is expected to reduce spending, while a negative impact increases spending. If the increase is small, on the order of less than $1 million, and is a one-time expenditure, then mark it as low. For larger sums of money, or for bills which will result in spending that money year after year, mark the bill as considerable negative impact. As you go through these questions, try to avoid marking everything as worst case simply because you dislike the bill. Having a large number of bills, all with considerably similar scores, does not allow us to invest our limited resources where they can be the most effective. If you've marked a bill unconstitutional, or even to a lesser extent, if you've marked it constitutional, fill in the constitutional note with a reference to the Constitution and a rationale as to how the Constitution applies. You can still add a note here, even if you marked the constitutional question as NA. If you are not sure how to interpret the relevant section, but you still have found text that might apply, you can still add it. The final section of the bill review is made up largely of free-form text boxes. You don't have to put text in all of them. One of the easier fields is the Won't Touch checkbox. If you recognize this issue as an NHLA Won't Touch issue, please check the box. It's okay to check this box, even if you're not 100% sure if it applies. Next is the Candidate Gold Standard blurb. Don't feel like you have to get this language exactly right. But this box is where you would attempt to put in 2 to 5 bullets supporting the position that you believe the NHLA should take if this bill appears in the gold standard. If you rated the bill as neutral, then it probably does not make sense to spend time coming up with bullets. In the anti-liberty talking points, you try to write some bullets that you think the opposition might have for this bill. So if we expect that the opposition will agree with an anti-liberty bill, try to put in a few bullets describing why you think they might take that position. Conversely, if the opposition is going to oppose a pro-liberty bill, take a shot at why you think they might oppose it. You do not have to fill this in, but it might be helpful for others who look at this review to develop their own bill testimony, to research and provide counterpoints to the potential opposition. Check this box if you think this bill belongs on the gold standard. Don't struggle to make this decision, make a guess and move on. The gold standard research team will make the final determination, but knowing what the original reviewer thought may help prioritize their efforts. Finally, we have the pro-liberty talking points box. In general, at this point, I would recommend ignoring this box. The original bill review form did not have the gold standard blurb box, and this is largely obsoleted by the addition of that field. However, if you feel strongly that there are additional talking points that you would like raised in testimony or other activism, feel free to add them here. If you are working a review and are not sure about some aspect of the bill or the bill review system, there are several things you can do. The first thing you can do is to post a question in the NHLA Bill Review Facebook group. A more experienced reviewer or board member may be able to help you. If your question is more specific about the bill itself, you can reach out to the bill sponsor directly. It is not unheard of for a reviewer to find an issue in the bill that even the bill sponsor has not recognized, and by reaching out, you may be able to help the sponsor recognize an issue and correct problematic or confusing text. You may also want to consider reaching out to the committee that owns the bill. This may be a better choice than the sponsor if you believe that the sponsor is not friendly to the mission of the NHLA. If you are stuck on a particular bill, feel free to quit the review and move on to the next bill. Now that you've got the tools to theoretically review a bill, let's look at a few example bills and walk through the review process on each of them. You may find it helpful to navigate to the Training Bills URL as we go through these slides so that you can read the text at your own pace. When you first click this bill, you'll see its status and bill text. Let's zoom in and look at the text of the bill itself. You can see that HB 1400 modifies existing RSA 1596 and extends the duration of a pistol revolver license from 4 years to 5. In addition, this bill would have removed the vague phrasing of suitable person from the statute and replaced it with more objective text that indicated the license should be issued as long as the person is not barred from owning and possessing a firearm. This is clearly an improvement over existing law. A purist would correctly argue that such a license should not be required in the first place, but the bill should be reviewed in the context of whether it improves the existing situation, not with respect to whether it aligns with an ideal standard. Having read the bill, let's look at some potential answers for each of the bill review sections for it. First, what topic is it? This one is pretty clearly a Second Amendment bill. Is it liberty-friendly? Well, we've already sort of hinted at that. It improves the current situation in multiple ways, so it is pro-liberty. Next is impact. The bill impacts all adults in the state in a pretty significant way. It does fall short of true constitutional carry. So the original reviewer marked it as average impact. An argument could be made that this should have been marked as high impact, and if there were a significant number of cases of people being arbitrarily excluded based on the existing language, it certainly would have rated as high impact. As you can see, though, reasonable people may have differences of opinion in some of these fields. With respect to civil rights, this bill protects rights because it prevents bureaucrats from arbitrarily denying citizens the right to self-defense. On the topic of personal responsibility, the bill does not fundamentally change the current situation, so a not applicable is fine. For right to property, the bill does not directly impact property rights, so again, not applicable. The clarity rating indicates whether or not the language is clear with respect to the intent of the legislation, and in this case it is quite clear. Note that a bill can be clear and still be anti-liberty, so this sub-factor is independent of whether or not you believe that the bill should exist at all. Next is accountability. The original reviewer believed that it increased retained accountability. I think a strong argument could be made for not applicable here, as the bill is not really directly addressing accountability per se. Another reviewer might look at the discretion that is being removed from the issuing authority and make the case that it reduces accountability. While I don't think that is really correct, these multiple perspectives point out why there may be disagreements on some factors and why not every bill needs to have every one of these factors rated. The reviewer marked it as constitutional. We recognize that the pistol and revolver license itself is constitutionally dubious, since the Constitution guarantees, in Article 2A, a right to keep and bear arms, and thus one could make a strong argument that the existing law infringes upon that right. In this case, the bill is reducing the potential impact of that restriction. As a result, the reviewer marked it constitutional. If not applicable had been selected, here we certainly would not have argued with that position. Enforceability. Not applicable for this bill. Regulation, bureaucracy. This bill certainly lessens regulation if for no other reason than it extends the term of the license and reduces the effort that the state will need to put into renewals. Fiscal impact. Less frequent renewals and more objective measures for issuance should slightly reduce the cost so that the impact is positive. Taxation. The license has an existing fee. This does not change it. The original reviewer marked fee for users, which is fine. Arguably, not applicable could have worked here as well. This is the actual gold standard blurb that was used for this bill. A few bullets like this are what should go here. The NHLA gold standard team will review and modify what you enter before it appears in the gold standard, so take a shot if you can, but don't worry if you can't find exactly the right words. Moving on to the next bill, we'll look at Senate Bill 370. Take the time to read the text. You'll notice that this bill simply creates a study committee. Like nearly all committees, there is some spending involved, mileage reimbursement, but this is quite small as compared to the rest of the state spending. On this bill's review, check the study committee checkbox. If you'd like, mark the impact as low impact. While not required for study committee bills, if you'd like, you can also mark the topic that it pertains to. Either way, after filling out these small number of fields, save the review and move on to the next one. Next, we'll look at House Bill 1169. This bill amends current law and prohibits fees for a bank account accessible online. Once again, we can go through each of the fields for the bill. You might want to pause and think about how you would rate each of these and then compare it to the actual review that was originally done. Remember that your ratings may not always match exactly, and that's okay. On this bill, the reviewer included an anti-liberty talking point. Recall, this is something that the NHLA opposition might say about the bill. And these are the blurbs that were entered for the gold standard. And that is all there is to doing bill reviews. At this point, the best thing to do is start doing reviews and learn as you go. Get started early in the legislative session, January and February. There will be plenty of bills, and many of them will be straightforward like the examples we've looked at today. As we get later in the season, you may find that many of the bills that remain are complex, and it may take an hour or more to do the review. And if you're starting at this point, don't get discouraged. As you review bills, don't feel like you need to write up very clean gold standard blurbs for every bill. Some bills will never make the gold standard, and even just completing the initial triage and scoring the bill helps us. When you are doing reviews, keep these thoughts in mind to help guide you in determining if a bill is pro or anti-liberty. Is the bill constitutional? Does it expand the size, cost, or power of government? If it does, it is anti-liberty even if you think the bill is a good idea. Are there unintended consequences? At times, the secondary effects of a bill may be worse than the stated intent of the bill. Think these things through while evaluating the impacts. And that's it. You are ready to start reviewing bills and defending liberty in New Hampshire. If you've not reviewed bills before, you'll need to email research@newhampshireliberty.org to have bill review privileges added to your account. Thank you.